my topic at first was, the protagonist, the Chinese artist and activist Ai Weiwei, and also China, and also freedom of speech. I would say that the way that I framed it from the beginning in thinking, why is this something people should watch for 90 minutes, was, first of all, I felt like it was kind of answered because Ai Weiwei has an incredible amount of creativity, energy, he's entertaining, he's charismatic. But the idea was to focus on what people in China can do, like where there is room to maneuver if you want to try to say something that might be out of step or that might be considered worthy of censorship. And so I think the idea was to focus on what he could do and what he was able to do rather than what he couldn't do. And I definitely think the biggest challenge that we faced was that in post-production, which then I had to go back into production, he was detained by the Chinese government. So they sort of were like, don't let it be just a movie about what he can do because, we're going to meet him at every step. And it really was this kind of, game of brinksmanship of, someone who will always resist when he's pressured. But I think that so I think in the end it's about the courage and the idea that courage doesn't come the reason it's courageous is because there are consequences. And we'll show the trailer, which actually we cut before, a couple months before Weiwei was detained, but we've just kind of always kept it because we've been so busy. He, by the way, was released in June, but is under much sort of harsher conditions related to his speech, his travel, his activities online. So it ends up being that Ai Weiwei Never Sorry really captures a few years in his life that, are before something big happened, and now we don't know what's going to come next.
Just to familiarize you guys briefly with the film, it's about these two worlds that collide behind the scenes at a festival in an all-white town in South Dakota. And it's honoring their black native son, Oscar Micheaux, who was a pioneer filmmaker and the godfather, really, of independent film, maybe the most prolific filmmaker in America to date, as he made 44 feature films. And my film was invited the year before.
Your short. My
short film to show there. And I had really no intention, along with my film partner, Mark, of even getting into documentary as a fiction person. But I have to say, we were so blown away by the open dialogue and the racial talk that was going on, the racial discussions that were being had that were so much more, I don't want to say brutal, really just very like what they were, not subterfuge, just really like upfront. And we ourselves, as an interracial couple, we were having so many problems in modern day New York with his family and all this sort of stuff going on that we found it just fascinating and compelling. Returned there the next year and found, with a great crew and all this stuff, and found ourselves getting pulled deeper and deeper and deeper into this world. And I think that the thing that I've found really fascinating and challenging all at once, as a fiction filmmaker, I always wanted to talk about race things, and I always did. But I think that the trickiest thing is that, especially in America, we can't talk about racial issues today because so many people are up to speed and know what correctness is and all this sorts of stuff. We always accept films that deal with race if it deals with it in the past or racial problems in another country. And this has to deal with structural racism, and at the same time, in a really great, unique, eccentric community of people holding on to this man, to some degree towards almost being fetish, and to another degree to being venerated. So we just found our middle road in that. Ultimately, what I had to do is, one, become a narrator to sort of guide the film a little bit, but not too much, because I think that the strategy, which is something that we constantly wrestled with in the edit room as we're filming, all these things, is always how do you objectively go in there and talk about things, particularly as a black person with white people and as a black person with black people, like where do where do you draw the line, and how do you not impose your agenda on people about race as they're trying to sort of talk to you truthfully and from the heart? So it was always remained a constant battle. And even when, you know, you're in the edit room, it's like, if you put in this line, you know, you might look like you're sort of not standing up for yourself, you know, but if you take out a certain line, it might rebalance the argument. So we have, or the discussion. So we have a lot of stuff, and basically to talk about power dynamics of race and class always seeped into this story, even though we tried to keep it like, let's deal with Oscar and the festival, and every single time it would get us into this spiral, and we realized like that's the realness of it all, is that no matter what, you can't separate the impact of race, class, and gender on power dynamics and how things, you know, structurally go.
I'm a documentary photographer, and my passion is post-conflict work. My commitment is to changing the way the media covers conflict by understanding that war is only half the story. I have a nonprofit that I started to help photographers tell those stories. So I was in the middle of my own aftermath project about forgiveness traditions in post-conflict African countries. When I met the man, the Sierra Leonean, who had been a human rights activist throughout the war, had engaged with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, was well aware of the special court, and was absolutely frustrated because nothing had addressed peace at the grassroots level. The international community completely screwed that up in Sierra Leone, and he thought it was never going to happen. So I had, for me, the issues that were under there were, we don't care about post-conflict stories, we don't tell them. The second was going up against essentially the human rights community by saying special courts may not be the perfect answer. And trust me, we have not gotten into a single human rights festival with this film. And my bottom line is questioning the idea that we should talk about saving Africa. I think it's a form of neocolonialism, and that we should be learning from Africa. Because when I started learning about these stories of forgiveness at the grassroots level in Sierra Leone, I mean, I was just astonished and humbled. The storytelling trick was twofold, because the forgiveness happens very quickly in the film, and in the culture itself, it is part of the tradition. I was trying to construct a film that kind of defied typical structure, and bear in mind I'm a first-time director and learning as I go about filmmaking, but that let you see the culture through the eyes of Sierra Leoneans. That was my goal, and my storytelling goal was to constantly take that Western voice in my head and take you by the hand and help you go deep into the culture.
Our film, you'll hear a little bit more about in a moment, but is sort of trying to change the conversation from a film about abortion to a film about ethics, and particularly medical ethics, but in the case of prohibition and criminalization of abortion in Nicaragua and El Salvador. And what was interesting, I think, as an outsider for us, I mean, we're sort of insider as women, dealing with some of the same questions and issues within our own countries, but also, and this is Alessandra and I, but being an outsider was in some ways necessary, because their stake is having this issue become a deep human rights issue. And for it to become a large human rights issue, it has to leave the confines of the borders of the country. And so in that way, the outsider position on that was actually a good thing. But the issues of trust and gaining trust are still as difficult from coming in from the outside. So a balance of those things. These are, particularly Nicaragua is a country that is on the left, so part of it is to connect it to the directions that this country, our own country, is going in, and some of the things that are happening within hospitals, allowing doctors who are against abortion to not treat women who are even deathly endangered. So that's the sort of context of it, but really we wanted to get inside the hospital wards, really into the fabric of what prohibition does to everyday life, and really show it from that perspective, and that there's nothing exotic here, there is nothing anomalous. This is just simply what happens daily in a public hospital in Nicaragua in the OB/GYN wards.
And this is only after the law has been changed for how long?
Since 2008, and for 130 years it was protected.
Abortion has again been on the words and on the conversations of everybody in the country, because it's something that nobody expected to actually happen. You know, that this very left, president went to bed with the church and changed the laws basically of the country, right? That's why we wanted to move the focus and not just pigeonhole it as the film about abortion, but a film about a doctor who has to deal with life and death, really. So that way we're trying to like suit our deal into a not pigeonhole the film.
The subject of my film was hunger in America. I am American, and you mentioned earlier in your intro, you know, the key thing, a very important factor is trust. And one of the biggest challenges, I mean, there was not a single day of the making of this film that I didn't wake up asking myself the question that this panel is asking, which is, you know, how do I balance the activism and the storytelling? How do I make a cinematic, entertaining film that will also impact, hopefully, policy, et cetera? And how do I do it about a subject that's invisible? And that also people don't necessarily think exists. So first it exists, let me tell you.
And you have a refrigerator filled with food if you have time to go shopping.
Right.
I mean, if it's empty, it's because you're too busy making the movie.
Right. Well, that's right. So that's where I'm the outsider. And I think that one of the most difficult things that I was going to say from a storytelling challenge perspective is, how do you get people to talk about something about which there's enormous shame? It's a taboo subject. I'm not coming at it from I'm there too. And for us and my filmmaking partner, Lori, and I thought long and hard about this. And, you know, it's not about like, and also, as you were saying, the film is about an issue, but it's about people. We wanted to say a lot of things, a lot of information about the issue, but at the heart of it is people. And so at the end of the day, the challenge was how to break through that sort of outsider thing. And what I did was just spend a lot of time in a couple of communities with a lot of people before we even filmed. Spent a lot of time in a community in Colorado with a tiny camera, maybe filming here and there, meeting people, getting to know them, getting to understand that there are things about which we have connections. I think that's what all of us are always doing, right? Is finding that real relationship with the subject. There's something always that we can hook into and connect with and be human together. So anyway, that was a big challenge. And also to the question that was spoken earlier, sort of that balance, that constant, like, but there's all this information, we need everybody to know all of this or they're not going to understand it. But really, none of that information matters if they're not connecting to humans. And I was really moved by seeing all these clips and trailers and everything, because at the heart of all of them are people with whom we're connecting. And without them, we're not, you know, really doing our jobs as storytellers, I guess.